Right now, and it is back to the campaign trail for Vice President Kamala Harris now that the 2024 Democratic National Convention has wrapped up, and former President Donald Trump is promising a surprise guest at his rally today in Arizona.
Joining us live this morning, back in Washington, D.C., our political correspondent. That was quick, Joe St. George. So, Joe, let's start with the final night of the DNC. Did the vice president, have a breakthrough moment last night in Chicago?
Well, first off, the breakthrough moment was the fact that she is the nominee of the Democratic Party. I think any summation of last night's event has to start with the fact that it was a historic moment in the United Center in Chicago with the first black woman, the first Indian woman accepting a major party's nomination in this country. It was certainly an opportunity for Vice President Harris to reintroduce herself to the American people, especially to undecided voters perhaps in Wisconsin. There was a reason that she devoted the first 10, 15 minutes of her address to talking about her life story. Yes, she's been vice president for 4 years, but in many ways people are learning her story, paying attention to her story in a new way now that she is the Democratic nominee. She talked about growing up in the middle class part of the Bay, not the wealthier part of the Bay. She talked about coming from a family, not only mixed race family, but one that was separated and dealt with separation like so many American families has dealt with. She talked about the need for an opportunity economy, charting a new path forward, and she repeatedly said through her speech that we, speaking of the Democratic Party, are not going back. Here's more from the vice president.
Just imagine Donald Trump with no guardrails and how he would use the immense powers of the presidency of the United States, not to improve your life, not to strengthen our national security, but to serve the only client he has ever had, himself.
Powerful moment on stage in Chicago, Illinois, and now the campaign moves on, guys. We have 70 plus days to go until Election Day.
Well, speaking of that, Joe, now that the DNC is over, what is the next big political event?
I think it could be today. If depending on what happens in Arizona, there is you don't need a political science degree to start connecting a few dots here. One, we can confirm that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is asked to remove his name from the ballot in Arizona. That's from the Secretary of State's office there. We know that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is going to be speaking to his supporters later today about the state of his campaign. And we know former President Trump is also in Arizona today and that he's teasing a special guest at his rally. Again, you can start to connect the dots. If Robert F. Kennedy Jr. leaves this race, that has the chance to be another moment here in 2024. He was nowhere close to winning the presidency. He was polling around 5% or so in Wisconsin. But we know that the election result, for instance, in Wisconsin is going to be decided by a few percentage points, most likely. 5% matters. We also know that in many of the polls that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. was drawing support from would-be Republicans, potential Trump supporters, in more ways than he was drawing support from potential Vice President Harris supporters. So this has the possibility today of being a big moment for the Trump campaign. As far as the other big events that we're going to be covering in great detail over the course of the next 70-plus days, look for September 10th's presidential debate in Philadelphia to be another big moment. I highly doubt it's as big of a defining moment as the presidential debate we saw in June in Atlanta, which ultimately resulted in President Biden leaving the race. But it's going to be an opportunity for Harris and Trump to be on the same stage. And really, I suspect issues will come to the forefront there. If there is one critique that a number of conservatives have about the Democratic convention, even some nonpartisan commentators, it's that it was very much high on platitudes, personality, themes, less on policy. The presidential debate on September 10th is when policy will take center stage.
Yeah, and we'll have to see that rally today in Glendale, Arizona, where the former president says he'll have that special guest, whether or not that's Robert F. Kennedy Jr., as you mentioned, could make a difference in this campaign. Well, Joe, thank you for being with us all week. Glad you got home safely to the family, and we'll see you next week.
Good to see you, my friends.
Bye, Joe.